Hi everyone, and welcome back to Clinical Neurology 101, and once again my name is Shane, and today we're just going to go over some structures and details that we left out last time. As you can see, I've drawn a more in-depth little brain there that just kind of runs through all the details that are included in this little spirally section. So I'm just going to start over here and we'll make our way over. So one of the structures here that I didn't include in our last video was the midbrain or the mesencephalon, when mes means middle, and that actually goes straight up from the pons, which is in the end of the medulla oblongata, which is shown right there. And that actually goes right up from the pons and into that little swirly spiky thing. And I haven't drawn it over here, but you could see it kind of goes up and right into there. So that's how that would look. And I've also drawn another structure here. It's called the foramen magnum. And the foramen magnum is at the end of the medulla oblongata. Essentially, it's where the spinal cord transfers from the medulla and through the opening at the base of the skull all the way down the back, and that's the spinal cord. So those are a couple of the new structures that we have here today, at least in that section. And again, we have the cerebellum and the little helmet that's on top of there and all that good stuff. So here is our bigger overlay, and as you can see, we've gone into a bit more detail on the surrounding areas. These two right here are of particular importance. This first one here, that is the hippocampus, which is associated in learning and memory, and this here, that is the amygdala, which is associated in emotion, anger, fear, all that good stuff. And of course, here we have our corpus callosum, the bridge between two hemispheres. I explained a little bit about that before, wherein if the corpus callosum was, for example, cut in a patient that may have epilepsy, that would prevent the two halves of their brain from effectively communicating with one another. And this dot here that I've drawn, that is actually called the locus ceruleus, and that is the nucleus of the pons, and that's actually really the driving center of our sympathetic nervous system, which we're going to discuss a lot more in upcoming videos. And I actually had it drawn here in the middle of the cerebellum for accidental reasons, so I just kind of moved it on over. And I also have the designated lobes, the temporal lobe, occipital lobe, parietal lobe, frontal lobe. So hopefully we should be familiar with our lobes by now, and if not, we can just, all you can do is practice. So here, this is one up from the pons. This is called the thalamus. And the thalamus is actually one of the most important structures in our brain. It is responsible for directing and kind of shunting all of the sensory input that we receive from the different structures of our brain, and it kind of converges in the thalamus, and the thalamus kind of shoots them out where they need to go. So the thalamus is particularly important. It's the sensory center almost of our brain, and in the middle of that, of course, we have the hypothalamus, which is usually associated with temperature regulation, light, dark, circadian rhythm, all that good stuff. And one of the newer structures that I've drawn here, that's the basal ganglia, that wraps right around the corpus callosum, and that's usually associated with the coordination of movement. And here you can also see I've drawn a lot of little squigglies. These squigglies are known as cortical folds, and cortical folding itself, that's known as gyrification. So if you just want to come over here, take a look at this. As you can see, this top part of the fold, that's the gyrus, and these spaces in between are called the sulcus, or the gyri, or the sulci. And this is cortical folding. And this is really what allows neurons to have that potential to jump between the different parts of the brain. And usually when you see in individuals or animals that don't have that gyrification, that don't have that cortical folding, they tend to be very delayed. They don't have as many motor skills. They're not as, unfortunately, they're not as intelligent. Some of them appear to have normal development, but most of them, they're very severely lacking, and usually the life expectancy is quite short, usually around a couple of years, at least in humans. Some animals, they simply don't have cortical folding and they just evolve like that, such as mice. Cortical folding, gyrification usually begins around the 23rd week of pregnancy. So in fetal development, your brain starts developing those little structures at 23 weeks. And honestly, scientists really don't know why our brain undergoes that. What they do know is that in individuals that actually have lissencephaly, which is what it's called when a patient exhibits a smooth brain, they again tend to exhibit much more delayed development, but we really don't know why that is. We don't really know a whole lot. We don't know if maybe, we don't even really know why it folds. Maybe it's due to the fact that there's an overabundance of neurons that just mechanically pushes the brain like that. We honestly don't have a very good understanding of that in general, but hopefully we'll get some young neurologists who want to go into the field of medicine and figure all that out for us. So over here we actually have our nervous systems, the different types of nervous systems, how it's classified. And over here, this is just a very brief overlay. We're going to go into much more detail into all of this in our next video. So this is the autonomic nervous system, and the way that I tend to advise you to remember that is that the autonomic nervous system is automatic. So breathing, heart rate, dilation, constriction, digestion, all of the stuff that we don't consciously control that originates in the brain, that would be an autonomic response. The autonomic nervous system is divided into two, the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and we'll go into that in one moment. Aside from the autonomic, we have the peripheral, and the periphery is anything that's outside the brain and spinal cord. So usually we see this with the peripheral nerves. We have the sciatic nerve, the perineal nerve, the brachial plexus, the cervical plexus, things like that. Those are all peripheral structures, so they're considered the peripheral nervous system. Nerves that go out from the spinal cord into our limbs, those are the peripheral nerves, so that would be the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system, that is just the brain and the spinal cord. So the thalamus is part of the central nervous system, the basal ganglia, central nervous system, cerebral central nervous system. So anything that's brain and spinal cord. The somatic nervous system is our voluntary nervous system, so that's anything that is associated with voluntary skeletal movements, such as the motor cortex, things like that. Those are all somatic, anything that's voluntary. And just once again an aside here, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is one of the most important structures. Again, we'll be discussing that in significant detail in the next video. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for the activation and constriction of our bodily organs and our reflexes and impulses and things like that. So it's classified as our fight or flight response. That's the sympathetic response, which is you get very clenched up, your pupils dilate to let in more light, you're looking out loud, you're ready to go, your muscles contract, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, everything is elevated. So that's the sympathetic. The parasympathetic is the exact opposite. That's when you take that deep breath and just relax, everything dilates. Usually parasympathetic, rest and digest. That's usually gut motility, things like that. That's actually controlled by the parasympathetic system. And constriction of the pupils, that's parasympathetic. You may have ever seen someone who might have taken an opiate where they get the pinpoint pupils. That's a parasympathetic response. I know it's counterintuitive. You'd think a constriction would be sympathetic, but it's actually not. Since it's not letting in that light, it's not actually activating, it's deactivating, basically. And the way that I usually remember just the layout is that sympathetic, if you're in danger, you need sympathy. So if you're being chased by someone, you need to run, you need to be active, you need to go. So danger, sympathy, and then for parasympathetic, I have the para outlined here. I kind of consider that like helps almost, like you have a paramedic, paralegal, things like that. So I would say if you're in danger, you need sympathy, and sympathy helps. So sympathy helps, parasympathetic, relax, activate. So I know that's not really official or anything like that, but well, and that concludes our introduction into the overview of the different types of nervous systems. And hopefully we'll continue on, and I'll see you in the next video.